Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next of our Knowledge Mobilization Flash Talk series. This is a partnership project between the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction and Wisconsin Center for Education Research. We also get support from the United States Department of Education. Today, we're fortunate to have Dr. Rebecca Kors here, who is a researcher and evaluator at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research, and among many other things, has expertise and experience in talking about out-of-classroom science learning. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Kors.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good Friday morning. Right, so just want to welcome you to my talk about informal science education. That's, I think, what most people are starting to use as a term these days. And I'm just going to dive right in so we can get through the talk and have a discussion. First of all, I think a lot of people, when they think about informal science education, especially educators, are thinking about how can I make the most of a field trip? So let's start with what is informal education or informal science education. It's learning that happens outside of a classroom, often outside of school, places like museums, libraries, camps, and also places at home like a kitchen or a workshop. We can talk about that more if you like. Labels that I have seen are informal learning, non-formal learning, free choice learning, hands-on learning, and there are plenty more. And there's an international group called CASE, or the Center for Advancement of Informal Science Education, and they define informal science education with 3 dimensions: lifelong, life-wide, and life-deep. So what are the advantages of informal science education? Well, first of all, it moves at a learner-driven pace. And also there's usually no anxiety or kind of distraction from tests or performance concerns. So all of the learners' energy can go into exploring and just trying things out. Also, if you're bringing a group, like a class group, you have a kind of a new, fresh group experience, which can eliminate the usual groupings of students, and that can also change the dynamic of the group. So people who study informal science education see in this setting, whether it's a museum or a nature center, as an optimum setting for motivation and for helping people learn to thrive. And 2 researchers, Deci and Ryan, developed the self-determination theory to describe this. So if you see this motivation circle here at the bottom, they say that if a person feels autonomous and competent and also feels a relatedness to the surroundings, then those are the ingredients for feeling motivated and for thriving in life. So with this background, what do studies show? How can we help people make the most of informal science education experiences? So one thing is to think about novelty or newness or unusualness. So when novelty is very high or very low, then the capacity for someone to learn is actually low. And it'll help if we take a look at this diagram. Oops, I'm going to move the star over here. That was a little mistake there. So let's just start looking at this graph with the horizontal line here, looking at setting novelty. So if you're at a museum, right, you might see a lot, right? Very big bells and whistles, flashing lights. And that would that could be interpreted by some people as high novelty, so they may feel overwhelmed. If you say we go to a nature center and someone doesn't really take in anything there, they say, wow, there's not much to do here. Whereas I don't have a computer, what should I do? They may feel bored, right? So let's look at what happens with learning in these situations, in these different situations. Learning here is on the left axis, left vertical axis, and it's the solid line, right? So when you're bored, studies are showing that your learning is low. And also, if we go way over to the right part of the diagram, if you're overwhelmed, you're distracted and your learning is also low. But if you are in the middle here, right, then you're hitting kind of a sweet spot with learning, right? Enough to attract someone, enough newness and unusualness, but not too much. On the other vertical axis, we have behavior of off-task behavior. And this is something like, looking at your cell phone, talking with your neighbor, falling asleep, things that we see when maybe we have a lecture segment in, for example, a science camp that I used to work at. And we see some of these off-task behaviors during those lecture portions. There's one other thing I want to talk to you about regarding how we can help people make the most of informal science education, and that is interest development. How do people develop interest in something? Well, first we want to break down interest, to think about it, into situational interest and dispositional interest, right? Situational interest is what you're doing at the moment. Is it interesting? Dispositional interest is, what are you interested in, right? I'm interested in plants. I'm interested in mountains. I'm interested in computers, right? So it's part of your identity, actually. And with the informal science education, experiences, those are usually what we call one-off or one-time experiences that really capture situational interest. They're designed to lure people in, interesting questions, a lot of times, some bells and whistles, right? And then if you have multiple experiences with a topic that you ran into in a informal science education experience, then you can, over time, internalize that interest so that it would become a dispositional interest. And this guy, Christoph Kropp, he developed the theory that I just described to you about how people develop interest, and I illustrated it for some research I did. So we'll just take a look at this. Here on the top left, we have the personal character, so the individual person's interest. And here, bottom left, the learning context, or the interestingness. And those both contribute to whether and the degree to which an informal science education experience will catch someone's situational interest. They'll say, wow, this is so interesting. And then if they, the next days and weeks, continue to interact with that topic, they'll start internalizing, as I said, the internalization process. So if you follow the first arrow here, they'll start to hold that situational interest. And over enough time, that will become dispositional interest. Great. So that's all I had to share, just to introduce this topic. I'm really looking forward to hearing, what your questions are, what your ideas are. And here I introduced 2 questions.